I've been debating whether to share this story for months now. My therapist thinks it might help me process everything, so here goes nothing. I'm 26 now, but this nightmare started when I was around 8 years old. My mom started having an affair with our neighbor, a divorced father of two. At first, I had no clue what was happening. I just knew that Mom would take me to the park near his house, and then sometimes she'd leave me playing while she went to help him with something inside. At that age, I didn't think much of it. It was just another playtime at the park. But over time, things started feeling weird. Mom would sometimes pick me up from school instead of Dad, which was unusual. And instead of going straight home, we'd stop at this man's house first. She'd tell me to play with his kids in the backyard or watch TV inside while she and the neighbor talked about adult things. I might have been young, but I wasn't stupid. The way she acted around him was different. She was always giggly, fixing her hair, wearing perfume she never wore at home. It was like she was a different person. By the time I was 10, I realized something was really wrong. Mom started actively involving me in her deception. She'd tell me, if Dad asks where we were, just say we went shopping. Or she'd hand me her phone and whisper, tell him I'm in the bathroom. At first, I just did what she said because she was my mom. I didn't fully understand the weight of what I was doing. I just knew it made her happy when I went along with it. But the lies kept piling up. I'd feel this tight knot in my stomach whenever I had to cover for her. I remember one time, Dad called while we were at the neighbor's house, and Mom frantically motioned for me to answer. I told him, Mom's helping another parent with something, and I hated how easily the lie rolled off my tongue. By the time I was 12, it got worse. Mom started taking me with her on errands that were just excuses to see this man. Sometimes she'd buy me ice cream or a small toy afterwards, like a bribe for my silence. One time she left me sitting in the car for almost an hour while she was inside his house. I remember sitting there watching the house, feeling sick to my stomach. When she finally came back, her lipstick was smudged, and she quickly fixed it in the rearview mirror before driving us home like nothing had happened. I started dreading any time she asked me to go somewhere with her. I knew what it meant, and I hated it. I hated being a part of something that felt so wrong. But what was I supposed to do? She was my mom. I was just a kid. When I was 14, I finally broke down. I couldn't take it anymore. I told my dad everything. I showed him the texts Mom sent me, asking me to cover for her. I told him about all the times she'd taken me to this man's house, how she made me lie. I expected him to be angry at her and to finally see the truth. But somehow, she twisted everything around. She convinced him that I had some kind of weird jealousy issue, that I was making up stories to come between them. She said I had manipulated her into spending time with the neighbor because I liked playing with his kids, and that now I was trying to cause drama because I was a troubled teenager. And the worst part, Dad believed her. I'll never forget the look of disappointment on his face when he said he was concerned about my mental health and that I needed help. My own father thought I was lying. He thought I was making everything up for attention. They sent me to therapy, but not the helpful kind. It was some therapist who already seemed to have made up her mind that I was the problem. Every session focused on my imagination and my need for attention. No one believed me. No one. I remember sitting in that office feeling like I was screaming into the void. Every time I tried to explain, the therapist would just nod like she was humoring me and then ask questions about my relationship with my mother. It was infuriating. At home, things got worse. My relationship with my mom was completely broken. She'd look at me with this cold anger, like I was a traitor. She started treating me differently, snapping at me over little things, punishing me for stuff that didn't even matter. And Dad? He just acted like I was a moody teenager going through a phase. He never brought it up again. It was like he had decided I was just wrong. And that hurt more than anything. I felt so alone. I started withdrawing, keeping to myself, avoiding my parents as much as I could. I spent a lot of time in my room, reading, doing homework, anything to escape. I stopped trying to make them believe me because I realized it didn't matter. They had already made up their minds. It wasn't until I moved out that I started to heal. But even now, at 26, I still carry that weight. The feeling of betrayal, the helplessness of being a kid trapped in an adult's mess. The pain of realizing your own parents won't stand by you. I don't know if I'll ever fully get over it, but I'm trying. A few months after everything blew up, my parents made an announcement. They said they were going to work on their marriage, and that part of the process would be having another baby. At first, I thought they were joking. It made no sense to me. How could having another child fix anything? But they were serious. And along with that, they had another decision. They were sending me away. They told me they needed space to focus on their relationship, so I was going to live with my aunt in another state. They framed it like it was for my own good, calling it a fresh start, but I knew what it really was. They were getting rid of me. I was the problem in their eyes, the inconvenience, the one who had caused drama and made their lives difficult. Instead of facing what had happened, they just erased me from the picture. I spent the rest of my high school years living with my aunt. She was nice enough, but she believed what my parents had told her, that I was troubled, that I had made up stories about my mom, that I had some kind of attention-seeking issue. I stopped trying to explain. No one had believed me before, so what was the point? I just kept my head down, focused on school, and counted down the days until I could be on my own. During those years, my parents had another child, my little brother. They would call sometimes, usually just to show him off over FaceTime. They'd talk about how happy they were as a family. Meanwhile, I was missing from every family photo. It was like I had never existed. They didn't invite me home for holidays. They never asked how I was doing. I was just gone. When I turned 18, I moved out of my aunt's place and got my own apartment. I put myself through community college and then transferred to a state university. I cut off almost all contact with my parents. Every now and then, my mom would send an email, but it was never personal. Just forwarded photos of my little brother, no real conversation. My dad never reached out at all. Fast forward to now, I'm 26 with a decent job, my own place, and finally a therapist who actually listens to me. I've spent the last few years trying to unpack all the trauma, the gaslighting, the pain of being cast aside. It's been hard, but I built a life for myself without them. Then, out of nowhere, 3 weeks ago, I got an email from my dad. It was short, just a couple of lines. I need to talk to you. I've discovered some things and I owe you an apology. Please call me. I ignored it. I stared at the email for a long time, feeling everything from anger to disbelief. Why now? Why after all these years? What did he even mean by discovered some things? as if the truth hadn't been there the whole time. Then he sent another email and another. Finally, last week he called me and I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something in me hesitated. I picked up and he was crying. I had never seen or heard my dad cry before, not once in my entire life. He was sobbing and he told me that Mom had left him 6 months ago for the neighbor, the same man she'd been sneaking around with all those years ago. And then the bombshell. My little brother, the child they sent me away for, isn't even his. A DNA test confirmed it. He said he had spent the last few months putting the pieces together and that he now realized I had been telling the truth all along. He admitted that he had believed Mom over me because it was easier, that he had sent me away to keep the peace, that he had convinced himself I was lying because the alternative was too painful. And now he says he's been living with the guilt. He regrets everything. He's begging for forgiveness. He wants to meet up, to talk, and to finally hear my side of the story. I hung up on him. I couldn't deal with it in that moment. It was too much. Since then, he's sent dozens of texts, emails, even a handwritten letter. He keeps saying he needs me in his life, that he can't believe how blind he was. And now, I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell. He had a chance to believe me when it mattered, and he didn't. He chose to send me away like I was trash. He missed everything: my high school graduation, my college graduation, every milestone in my life. He stood by a liar instead of his own daughter. But another part of me, I don't know, is this a chance to finally be heard? To finally have someone acknowledge what happened to me? My therapist says it's entirely up to me whether I want a relationship with him now, but that I should think carefully about what I want out of it. AITA if I refuse to meet with him? Am I being too harsh? Or is this just another case of a parent wanting absolution for their mistakes without having to do the hard work of making amends? I honestly do not know what to do. Update 1. I'm completely overwhelmed by the response to my post. I never expected so many people to read my story, let alone offer such thoughtful advice. Honestly, I was terrified to share it, but seeing the support and validation from so many strangers has been incredibly comforting. Thank you to everyone who took the time to comment. I've read every single one, even if I haven't been able to respond to them all. Just knowing that people believe me and understand how painful this has been means more than I can put into words. After reading through your comments and talking more with my therapist, I decided to take a small step forward. I didn't agree to meet with my dad yet, but I did send him an email, a long one. I wrote out everything I remembered from my childhood. The lies, the cover-ups, the way I was used as a shield for my mom's affair. I told him about the emotional toll it took on me, how it felt to be cast aside and disbelieved by my own father, how being sent away made me feel like I was disposable. I told him about how I had to rebuild my life without parents, how I've struggled with trust, with feeling like I mattered to anyone. I ended the email by saying I wasn't sure if I was ready to have him in my life again, but if he was truly serious about making amends, then he needed to prove it, not just with words, but with real actions. I made it clear that I wasn't going to just let him waltz back into my life and pretend like everything was fine. His response shocked me. He sent back an email just as long as mine, maybe longer. In it, he admitted everything. He said that after I was sent away, he and my mom did try to work on their marriage, but that deep down he always felt something was off. He admitted that my mom was emotionally distant, that she never really seemed interested in fixing things. He confessed that even back then he had suspicions about my little brother's paternity, but he had convinced himself that he was just being paranoid. He said there were times when things didn't add up, like how my mom would refuse to let him come to certain doctor's appointments during the pregnancy. But he pushed those feelings aside because he wanted to believe her. And the most shocking part? He attached screenshots of text messages between my mom and her affair partner from the past year. They were discussing how they had kept their relationship going on and off for years, even after she had recommitted to my dad. Some of the messages were straight up mocking him, laughing about how he had no clue. The worst ones were about my little brother. There were messages between them referring to him as our son and joking about how dad had spent a decade raising another man's child without realizing it. It was absolutely sickening to hear. My dad said he found the messages when my mom accidentally left her tablet logged into her account. He confronted her immediately, and she didn't even try to deny it. She admitted everything. Within a week, she had packed up and moved in with the neighbor, taking my little brother with her. She told my dad that my brother needed to be with his real father. Just like that, she was gone. Dad says he's been sitting with the guilt of everything for the past 6 months, thinking about how blind he was, how he let himself be manipulated, and most of all, how he failed me. He told me that losing my brother overnight made him realize what he had done to me. That the way my mom threw my brother aside when it was convenient for her was exactly what they had done to me. And now he wants to make it right. He wants to meet up, to talk in person, to give me a real face-to-face apology. He suggested we meet for coffee next weekend. I'm considering it, but I'm also terrified. What do I even say to him? How do I sit across from the man who abandoned me and act like we can just start over? I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I even want to. My therapist says that it might be healing to hear him apologize in person, to see his remorse firsthand. But she also reminded me that I don't owe him anything. I don't have to make a decision right away. And if I do choose to meet him, I can set strict boundaries. I don't have to accept him back into my life just because he suddenly feels guilty. I'm still thinking about it. I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. I'll update again once I make a decision. Update 2. I met with my dad yesterday. We had agreed to meet in a public place, somewhere neutral where neither of us would feel trapped. I chose a small cafe near my apartment, a quiet little spot with warm lighting and the faint smell of coffee and fresh pastries in the air. I arrived early, wanting a few minutes to gather my thoughts before facing him. I picked a table in the corner, one where we wouldn't be easily overheard, but also not tucked away in complete isolation. I had spent the whole morning debating whether or not to go at all, but something in me needed to hear what he had to say. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. It had been years since I'd seen him in person, and time had not been kind. His hair, once dark, was now almost entirely grey. He had lost a noticeable amount of weight. His posture seemed smaller, like the weight of everything he had done or failed to do had physically diminished him. There was something hollow in his expression, a look I could only describe as broken. First few minutes were painfully awkward. We danced around the real reason we were there, making small talk about the weather, the cafe, how my job was going. It felt forced, unnatural, like we were two strangers trying to fill the silence. But there was no avoiding it forever, and eventually the question that had been sitting in my chest for over a decade slipped out. Why had he believed her over me? Why had he chosen to ignore the truth right in front of him? He didn't even try to hold back his emotions. Right there, in the middle of the cafe, he broke down crying. He told me he had been weak, selfish, afraid. He had been so desperate to keep my mom, so terrified of losing his family, that he convinced himself that I was the problem instead of facing the reality that his marriage had already been crumbling. He admitted he had always known deep down that something wasn't right, but denial was easier. Denial allowed him to avoid the painful truth that his wife was unfaithful and his daughter was suffering because of it. I asked him why they had sent me away. He admitted it had been Mom's idea, that she had spun it as something necessary for my well-being, claiming I needed a fresh start, space, specialized help. He told me he went along with it because it was easier than dealing with the growing tension at home. He said he had justified it to himself at the time, convinced that maybe it was the best thing for everyone, but now he saw it for what it was, an excuse to remove the one person who refused to play along with the lies. I told him about my life, filling in the years he had missed. I told him about my struggles, my achievements, the way I had fought to rebuild myself from the ground up. I talked about the trust issues that had followed me into adulthood, the long road of therapy, the lingering pain of being abandoned by both parents. He didn't interrupt, just listened, nodding occasionally, his face crumpling with emotion. When I finally finished, he told me he didn't deserve my forgiveness. He said he had failed me in every possible way as a father, and he wasn't expecting anything from me except the chance to apologize. Then he told me something I wasn't expecting. He had been in therapy too. Since my mom left, he had been trying to understand why he had let things happen the way they did. He had been confronting his own weaknesses, his fear of abandonment, his need for validation, his tendency to believe what was easiest rather than what was true. He said he wasn't asking me to pretend like the past didn't happen, but that he hoped maybe one day I'd be willing to build something with him, even if it was small. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell him that it was too late, that he had made his choices and had to live with them. But another part of me, the part that had spent years craving acknowledgement, couldn't ignore the raw regret in his voice. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't shifting blame. He was just owning it. And that was something I never thought I would get from him. I told him I needed time. He said he understood. Before we left, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a check for an amount that stunned me, enough to pay off my student loans entirely. I tried to refuse it, not wanting his money, but he insisted. He told me it wasn't about buying my forgiveness, it was about doing something he should have done years ago, helping me. I still don't know how I feel about it. On one hand, it feels like a poor attempt at making up for years of neglect. On the other, it's real, tangible help for something that has been weighing on me for years. Maybe it's not about the money itself, but about the fact that he's finally taking responsibility for something. Then, this morning, I got a text from my mom, a single sentence. I hear you've been talking to your father. Don't believe his lies. He's trying to turn you against me just like he always has. After years of barely speaking to me, she suddenly cared about what I was doing. I was so transparent, so obvious that she was only worried about how this would make her look. I didn't respond, and I don't plan to. Tomorrow I have a session with my therapist. I need time to process everything and to figure out what I really want from all of this. Right now I feel overwhelmed, but for the first time in a long time, I also feel something else, maybe a little bit of hope. Not hope for a perfect father-daughter relationship, because I don't think that's possible, but hope that maybe I can finally start finding some closure. Update 3. Everything that has happened in the past few days still feels surreal. I kept replaying it all in my head, trying to process how quickly things escalated and how, for the first time in a long time, I found myself in the middle of a family crisis. Not as an outsider, not as the scapegoat, but as someone who could actually make a difference. It all started when I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. On the other end was my little brother crying, his voice barely above a whisper. He told me he was miserable and that he missed Dad, that he didn't feel safe in the house he was living in now. He had called from a friend's phone because he knew Mom checked his. He had memorized my number from her contacts and holding on to it like a lifeline. Hearing the fear in his voice did something to me. This was a kid I barely knew, someone I had always associated with my parents' betrayal. Growing up, I had resented him without ever really knowing him. He was the child they got to keep, the one they replaced me with when they sent me away. But none of that was his fault. He was just a kid who had found himself in the middle of a mess he didn't create, and I couldn't just ignore that. I told him to stay calm, to go back inside and to act normal. I promised him that I'd figure something out. As soon as I hung up, I called Dad. He was stunned to hear what had happened, but it didn't completely surprise him. He admitted he'd been worried and that he had been trying to get more time with my brother, but Mom had been making it as difficult as possible. The fact that he wasn't the biological father complicated things, even though he had raised my brother for 10 years as his own. The courts didn't always acknowledge that bond the way they should. We agreed to meet in person to figure out a plan. He came over to my apartment, and for the first time in a long time, we sat down as something close to allies rather than estranged family members. He had already been consulting a lawyer about custody, but the situation wasn't simple. In some states, a non-biological parent could claim rights as a psychological parent if they had been the child's primary caregiver, but it wasn't guaranteed. The best chance he had was if my brother openly stated that he wanted to live with him, and even then the court would have to decide. While we were talking, my phone rang again. It was my brother, but this time he was sobbing. Mom had found out he had called me. She was furious, screaming at him, throwing things, saying awful things about Dad. He was terrified. Without a second thought, Dad and I got in the car and drove straight to her house. By the time we arrived, we could hear the yelling from outside. Dad didn't hesitate. He called the police to report a domestic disturbance, and we stayed in the car until they arrived. It felt like an eternity, waiting, listening to the muffled chaos from inside. When the officers finally walked my brother out of the house, his face was streaked with tears. But he ran straight to Dad and held on to him like he was the only safe place in the world. The police spoke to everyone separately. My brother told them he was scared, that he wanted to leave, that he didn't feel safe there. They explained that without a court order they couldn't remove him permanently, but they strongly suggested that Mom allow him to stay with Dad for the night to let things cool down. Shockingly, she agreed. Maybe because she was embarrassed, maybe because she just wanted to get rid of him for a while. Either way, my brother left with us that night, and Dad immediately called his lawyer to file for emergency custody. There would be a court hearing within the week. Then, in a twist I never saw coming, Mom's affair partner reached out to Dad. He claimed he was done with the drama, that Mom had been unstable lately, and that he wanted no part of the ongoing custody battle. He even offered to testify in Dad's favor, saying he believed my brother would be better off living elsewhere. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was really happening. He had never wanted the responsibility of raising a child, and now that things were messy, he was looking for an exit. Some people never change. Over the next few days, I spent time with my brother for the first time in any real capacity. It was strange at first, seeing him as more than just a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in my life. But the more time I spent with him, the more I saw him for who he really was. A sweet, curious, funny kid who loved dinosaurs and video games, and who had been just as discarded and neglected as I had been. He asked me why I hadn't lived with them when he was little, why I had always been somewhere else. I gave him the simplest, gentlest version of the truth I could. Our parents had decided it was better for me to live with my aunt. He didn't need to hear the whole ugly story, maybe someday when he was older, but not now. Through all of this, the most unexpected thing has been the way Dad and I have started working together. I never thought I would find myself on the same side as him again, but here we are, trying to make things right for my brother in a way no one ever had for me. I don't know what that means for our relationship in the long run. The past still exists. The hurt doesn't just vanish because of one good action. But I see him trying. I see the way he's fighting for my brother and the way he's stepping up now in a way he never did for me. And it's making me wonder if maybe people can change. My therapist tells me that healing isn't a straight line. Some days I feel like I can forgive him, and other days the pain comes rushing back. I'm not rushing to figure it all out. For now, we're talking more mainly about my brother, but sometimes about other things too. He asked if we could have dinner, just the three of us, and I said yes. Mom, on the other hand, has been relentless. She's been texting me non-stop, switching between pleading with me to convince my brother to come home and accusing me of turning him against her. It's almost eerie seeing her manipulation from a distance instead of being caught up in it. I recognize it now for what it is, her desperate attempt to control the narrative. I haven't responded to her messages, and I don't plan to. I don't know how the custody case will go, but I hope Dad wins. My brother deserves a stable home, a safe place where he can't get caught in the crossfire of Mom's chaos. He deserves better than what he's been given so far. As for me, I finally feel like I have a say in my own life. I'm not that scared, discarded teenager anymore. I have my own job, my own place, my own choices, and right now I'm choosing to be there for my little brother in a way no one was there for me. Whatever happens with Dad, whatever relationship we end up having or not having, I know one thing for sure. I'm going to be okay. And for the first time in a long time, I actually believe that. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.